The relationship between Iwokrama and the GSI project. Iwokrama was selected as the pilot site for Guyana. Under this project, Iwokrama was awarded 2 contracts. And the main contract was to look at the monitoring program of Iwokrama, because when we're talking about ecosystem services and marketing of ecosystem services, you have to look at how to manage and maintain the service, and the way to do that is through having an established and proper monitoring system. So under that contract, we were able to further develop and improve on the existing monitoring system of Iwokrama. Also, the project also supported the purchase of equipment, also supported human resources. We were able to hire a few rangers and so on specifically onto this project, and also another researcher as well, who later became our monitoring coordinator of the program. The project actually supported us refining our monitoring framework, the Iwokrama monitoring framework, but also there were a number of outputs. So we were able to produce a monitoring report based on the data we were collecting for a year and a half. There was a baseline also report about mostly focused on biodiversity within the Iwokrama forest. There was a business plan, a management plan produced, and also, of course, the link with the Guiana Shield Institute in terms of producing that training manual. So those are some of the outputs, the tangible outputs that came out of the project. But more so, the capacity building, I think, was a very important component of it. So you still have the human resource aspect to continue the work, because Iwokrama is committed to continue monitoring. We have to monitor based on our objectives. So we're continuing with the monitoring program, and we intend to do so forever, as long as Iwokrama exists, because that's part of our responsibilities.
But under the project, we managed to simplify this, so to speak, and focus it on the different ecosystem services of the project. And while our protocol initially stems from our management plan, so in all that we do, it has to feed back into the management plan for the Iwokrama forest. We then broke the protocol up into 2 documents. One was called the framework, and the other one was called the manual. And the framework was meant to say why we were doing what we were doing and how it links directly back to the management plan. So why were we looking at specific biodiversity? Why were we looking at a specific method? Why were we using a specific method to conduct our surveys and that sort of thing? The manual said exactly how this was to be done. So when we needed to leave for our patrols, how many species we were looking for, what species we were looking for, and that sort of thing. So this helped. Anybody can now come in and go through these 2 documents and understand completely what we were doing and why we were doing it and how we go about doing it. And we did have the assistance of Starvation when they came in. They did some ground truthing work. They presented produced the vegetation type maps and so. And there was one thing that we observed in the vegetation type map. There was an area that showed some level of clearing. We did the ground truthing and found out it was an area that was a swamp and had dried out. Right? So it wasn't actually deforestation within the area, but because the map was there, we could see a change, and we could go do the ground truthing and be able to see, okay, we could verify that, this is not something we need to be worried about, it's natural. Right? But the maps helped us to do that. Our biodiversity is one of the more complex aspects, because there's so much of it to do. And in order to make it practical, in order to make it doable, we had to break it down a lot. And so we have various forms of monitoring our biodiversity. We have on the road, because it dissects the forest and can have an impact on wildlife as well. We have the river, because the Iwokrama forest is pretty much bordered by rivers. And we have some other methods that we've been implementing to test the various activities of the forest and see how our activities are impacting on wildlife. 3 forms of road monitoring that we do is a general one, and we have a selected list of species. So we don't just go looking for everything, because it's highly unlikely that you'll see everything every time you go out. So we have species that use the road. So for example, like the jaguars, agouti, grey-winged trumpeters and so forth, they use the road, they cross over and that sort of thing. So those are the animals you're likely to see and that are likely to have an impact by, for example, vehicles on the road and increasing the number of vehicles on the road. So we have a selected list of species that we observe on every patrol throughout the entire length of the road. But these don't look specifically at birds. They don't capture birds. They look mostly at mammals and birds that use the road. So we also included transects. Transects, we walk a line along the road, 500 meters long, and we observe all the birds that within that time frame, right? And that helps us to capture as well the birds within the area. It helps us to capture within the different forest types and throughout the year as well. So how are, for example, seasonal changes like flooding and that sort affecting them as well? Are they migrating, depending on the various forest types? The borrow pits, the road is made from laterite, and along the road there are laterite deposits. And so what the people that construct the road would do is go and take the laterite from these pits, from these deposits, forming huge pits, and they make the road. At the end of the day, they leave a huge pit sometimes very small ones. And so we've selected a few of these, and we observe them for scat and prints. Some animals, for example, like the jaguar, don't always come out on the road. You may not always see them on the road, but they tend to use pits that are hidden from the road, from direct view of the road, to dry off after maybe a rainstorm. Sometimes they come out to hunt there because agouti and other small birds and so would come within the area. Large birds, rather, would come within the area. So they use these burrow pits as well. And so we observe them. And we have had evidence of jaguars, tapir, ocelot, and a whole sorts of animals within the area. Our river monitoring, again, we did this in two forms. We have a general observation that we do. We have 3 selected species that we look for, the giant and neotropical river otters and the arpaima. And we look for these because they're indicator species of water quality. If the water quality is degrading, they will tend to migrate. So if you're seeing them within the area, the water quality, it's fair to assume the water quality is of a good one. However, this didn't capture all of the species that use waterways within the area, and so we also have transects within these areas. What we do is, these are approximately 2 kilometers long. You're in a boat, and the captain slows the boat to the minimum that he can with the given conditions, and observations are made for all the for select wildlife. And the reason for this is because a macaw won't literally use the river. So if you happen to see a macaw flying over, it's just opportunistic, all right? But species like swallows and kingfishers and herons, and so they use the river because they catch fish from the river. So they again can be impacted by the river, right? So a change in the water quality, a change in the availability of food for them will cause them to migrate or change their feeding patterns or something of the sort. All right, so being able to monitor them as well can show the impacts of water quality and the impacts of our activities on the river. Under the project, one of the other things we managed to do, as I mentioned, the Borboro River runs through the Iwokrama forest and extends past Surama village. What we've done with Surama is we've signed a memorandum for cooperation with them, and they do quarterly patrols of the Borboro River from their end coming down to our end. And this helps in managing illegal activities like fishing and hunting and mining within the area. Another survey we were able to do is otters, like I mentioned, they're indicator species for water quality. And an initial study was done in 2002. So we had that as a baseline, so to speak. And then under the project, we managed to do a second survey in 2009, which showed us a change in where the otters were. So there's mining done on the opposite bank of the Siparuni River, which can have an impact on the water quality. So to be able to see whether there was a greater presence of otters within that area as opposed to within the Iwokrama forest, or as opposed to upstream of Ecological, was vital in understanding the quality of water, the quality of the water surrounding the forest. So when the survey was done, we did see a minor change. It wasn't a significant change, but there was a minor change in the number of dens and campsites observed within the Siparuni, Ecological, and the Borboro rivers. The other survey that we do is what we term a forest impact survey, and this is really to address the impacts of our reduced impact logging practice. And this looks specifically at understory birds, bats, mammals, and primates, and so. It is done in 6 of our management units. within a management forestry term for they break the forest up into these blocks and so forth, and they call them management units. So it was done in 6 management units and a control site before they were harvested. The intention, it's a very long-term study. The intention is to be able to repeat this study after the years have been harvested to see what's the change in, for example, species diversity, species composition, abundance and that sort of thing. And we're starting the post-harvest. All of the pre-harvest have been completed, and we're commencing the post-harvest November, December of this year, because all of the units have been harvested and they're up on closure. But we also have a criteria for when they can be harvested, because obviously you can't close a unit today and then go do the survey tomorrow. So they had to be closed for at least 6 months before the post-harvest is done. And this has been done for at least 2 of the units, and so we're going to start doing the post-harvest surveys. And then we'll be able to say what are the impacts of this activity on the forest as well.
The second contract was a benefit sharing contract, and with this we were able to involve the NRDDB and the Guiana Hill Institute. So for the NRDDB, they were able to go and do some outreach activities with the communities as it related to ecosystem services. They dealt with issues of climate change and issues to that effect. In terms of the training component, the Guiana Hill Institute produced a beautiful little ecosystem services manual with which they have now incorporated into their curriculum, and the students actually are taught based on this manual with ecosystem services.
The NRDDB has been partnering with Iwokrama on many projects, and one such project of the Guiana Shield Initiative is the development of a module on ecosystem services. This module was written by 3 former staff members of this institution, and we now use this module in our classroom every day to support our natural resource management program. It also supports the low carbon development strategy program of this government, because ecosystem services and climate change, as we all know, is pretty new to a lot of us. So this module is what we use to assist our young people in understanding what it is all about. This module can also be used not only with youths but with the communities. And there are other projects now that has to do with natural resource management that the NRDDB and Guiana Hill Institute is doing with other partners, and this module can be used also to assist those programs or to support those programs.
The module about that was developed through the GSI project on ecosystem services, that I think is a really beneficial and very important tool for communities, especially the young people that is being trained at Guiana Hill Institute. I think they are the ones who understand the concept at a more advanced level than the community members. What is important is to really revise it and make it into a more simplified version. But I think there's 2 ways in which that could be done. One way is to extract the information that is in the booklet and put it in a simple presentation format, like so that people can understand it. So that when you go to communities, people could be able to use certain demonstration, making practical examples of what happened around their surrounding.
This booklet helped me give me information about the ecosystems, the environment, and the services. I like the games, the quiz inside, and the poem.
Well, the puzzle is more or less going to create, because the context in it is what is important, but then you have to build these people's imagination by having all these puzzles and testing their ability to see how they could respond to the material that is inside the booklet itself. So that is what is that is why it is kind of fun, so that when they're being trained on this booklet, they must be able to balance both sides, the fun part of it and, you know, brain teasing and so forth.
It's a very important document. When you read the module, you would see it's very interactive, very fun. It's fun. You can learn easily from it, and that is how the students have been using it.
Yeah, this book gave us a lot of information. Not only this mainly is on our area, our surrounding here. This is what happening in our surrounding, and we learn more how the ecosystem works around this area. I find the module was easy to read, and you could get information more easy, because things were simple and so you could understand.
We cater here for youths between the ages of 16 to 18 years. One of the criterion for attending this institution is that the youths must have an interest in the environment, and also they have to be interested in going back to their communities to work for their community's development. So we focus mainly on natural resource management subjects, cultural skills we foster, and we also do math, English, computer skills, and agriculture. It's a 2-year program, and when the students graduate, they can either go back to their communities and work as leaders, or they can go to study further at the tertiary institutions of this country. So we're gearing them to go out into the world and to also work in their communities and in Guyana as a whole.
We have this group of youths who are in this wildlife club, and they do monitoring every Saturday in the village. They're helping us to develop a boarding list, and every year there is 3, 4, 5 days trip into the river with the elders and the teachers, those youth, the older youth leaders, along with the old people. They will go there to learn like the handicraft or trapping, and just to keep that knowledge of the forest.
A very useful tool, but I think what is important is that we need to begin to use it at the community. Yeah, I think that's what is lacking at the moment, and we need to work on that basically.
What I would like to see is that this module be extended or given to other primary schools and secondary schools in the North Rupununi and in the region, so that other students also can benefit from it.
Iwokrama supported to a large extent because they were our close partners, and we had to get feedback back and forth, share the ideas. Is this good? Is not good? What need to be included? So everybody had their part. They made a substantial contribution to the booklet, I must admit. Apart from the community outreach, of course, we were given back and forth feedback, and then with the drafting of the booklet, you know, the format of it, and, you know, putting all the content together and so forth. So they played a very important role, I must admit.
The manual was produced in order to support the Bean Hill Institute and their curriculum. And also, remember, the Bean Hill Institute also provides for community training as well. We have some incoming projects, which, for instance, we have one now funded by NORAD, Norwegian funding, that is going to be looking at community MRV, monitoring, reporting, and verification. And one of the things we're looking at is also to do the training of the community monitors using this community manual, this Being a Hill manual. So it's not only for the students, but also for training of community, because it's was written by the staff of the Being a Hill Institute, which included 2 community persons. And it's tailored and in such a way that it's simple enough to be a very good teaching tool in terms of training other community members as well.
Generally, you had response from young people, you had response from women's group, you had response from older folks, because of course the older folks might have a different idea or different thought about this whole ecosystem. Until it was explained, they were able to participate also, because we had like group sessions, like working group, and people like interacted using their own cultural approach to testing the modules. So the feedback was both ways. Young people, women, of course, they were important, and then of course the men participated to a large extent. We visited 16 communities. And at each village, we had like a big public meeting where we had like demonstration of how the ecosystem worked, using drama, using cultural approach. That is so important, because I think that is how the people began to understand the real importance of the ecosystem services and how they can relate and place a value to the services that the environment provides. So the response to the community outreach was very positive, making it so important that, including what probably was missing in the booklet, people were able to make that contribution. So their voices and their input had to be included, so that when it is being implemented at the community level, they understand exactly where we are coming from.
Iwokrama is very supportive to gender equality and so on. A number of our rangers, we have a few rangers that are female. A researcher was female. One of the persons involved in the Being a Hill manual was female. But I think the NRDDB is also conscious of that as well, and promoting women in certain roles as well. Sometimes you may not have an equal balance of men to women. Sometimes you have more women, sometimes you have more men, depending on what the project activities are. But Iwokrama and the NRDB are very conscious of gender roles and gender equity in terms of project activities.
Women, they have been on the forefront of everything. They were the ones who actually started these ideas with the women's group. The cassava farming, they were the ones who started it. So when we had these people coming to visit us and asking us if there's anything that we could do to generate income, the women were already in place and say, okay, we have this project, we have a body that is managing this process, we need some support. So they were basically on the forefront, and the men, of course, got involved at a certain level. So supporting each other was very important. And of course, we had 2 years ago, we had this flood in the Rupununi, and we were able to supply communities with over probably close to 10,000 pounds of farine. And all was, produced because of the active involvement of the women. Yeah. At first, we were thinking of we were targeting mostly young people, because the young people are the drivers of development. But after realizing, after the community outreach, it was important that we take into consideration also the people at the community level. So it both ways. So you have the young people, and then of course you have the people at the community level who would want to have a better understanding of the ecosystem services. And I think, considering, well, of course, with the green economy and the climate change, we had all those things had to be incorporated as part of the community outreach, making it so important that people realize, okay, I think this is why we need to take care of our environment. This is the reason why we need to safeguard our resources. But how do we get the benefit? So that had to be explained in great detail.
That Iwokrama was really happy to collaborate on this project with the GSI, and we were pleased with the support from the UNDP, EU, and also IUCN, SARVision, Eco-Securities, all the other partners that were involved in the project, and we'd be happy to continue this kind of collaboration in the future, because the objective of Iwokrama is to show that these models could be created, and these things relating to the sustainability of the environment and of people and people's livelihoods and so on can be done, and done in a sustainable way.